People sometimes ask me, Sage, what are we going to do about the global crisis? Wisdom is fine for what it is, but how will this wisdom address the major world transformational shift that's taking place? And so I ask you, what global crisis? What world transformational shift? Even if such is underway, what would you hope to do about it? If we continue to ignore the issues and it culminates into a complete collapse and the whole thing crashes and burns, so what? What's the worst that can happen? The extinction of mankind? It won't stop imagination, awareness, and evolution. No more than the extinction of the dinosaurs not having any impact that hindered the progression of life. In fact, the extinction of mankind as we know today is guaranteed to go extinct one way or another. Not only mankind, but every life form that exists on the planet. It will all go extinct sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. So what's there to be afraid of? Mankind is not doing anything significant or special other than serving as one link in a long chain. There is nothing to save, nothing to preserve, and nothing to uphold. This is a sheer impossibility. So whatever your worst case scenario is, bring it on. None of it should scare anyone in the slightest bit. You had nothing before all of this began, and when you leave it, it will also be with nothing. So what are you so desperately trying to hold on to? Your best possible answer could be love. But worry not, love will continue on with or without mankind. Don't worry about your loved ones because nothing is really created or destroyed. The essence of your loved ones will always endure. Only the appearance of a form will fade away. But does it need to be so harsh? Does man have to go extinct? Can't man transition into a new contextualization? Mankind will, and extinction is part of the transition. Let's not get overly attached to this thing called humanity. Humanity is fine and is very well suited for life here on this planet. But if mankind wants to evolve, he can't be afraid to shed his skin. For mankind is not very well suited for the exploration of space, no more than a dolphin being well suited to traverse the land. And for evolution, all it takes is a maneuver of the imagination. When enough imagination becomes focused on a specific item and hits a critical mass, it becomes reality. Single imaginations are capable of revolutionizing the settings of a contextualization. Collective imagination is capable of revolutionizing the perspective of a contextualization. As for the issues of the world, if you really want to address them, then find the root cause and put awareness on it. Stay aware of it and let it flourish unhindered. To many of you, this will not sound like a viable solution, but it is a guaranteed solution. When awareness is concentrated on something, it will dissipate. Only when we ignore it does it sustain and continue. When awareness is present, it speeds up entropy. Sometimes the way to win is to lose. Often success will follow failure. So if you want to bring something to an end, then let it expand. If you want to be rid of something, then let it be present and flourish. It may seem a little bit paradoxical, but it works. Let things run their course unhindered, and they will quickly reach their conclusion. Just remain aware of it. As William Blake said, the road of excess leads to a palace of wisdom. So let's really get into the world of distinction, discrimination, contradiction, separateness, attachment, and relative truth. So many people are engrossed in the dream storyline, going on and on about it endlessly, thinking that somehow it's all going to add up to something or lead somewhere, like a dog chasing its own tail. So you have enemies, right? Yup, you have enemies. Oppressive opposition, draconian powers that want to dominate you, shadow governments that want to enslave you, secret societies that want to kill you, fascist factions that want to rule you, corrupt institutions that want to steal from you. They all want to overtax you, scam you, take away your freedoms, rights, and liberties. There are a lot of details and complexities surrounding these issues, but I think you get the general idea. They are out to get you. They want to either enslave you or kill you, or maybe a combination of both. Kill a whole bunch and enslave the leftovers. Whatever the case, it's bad intentions. But does this make any sense? Especially since they already control a populace of willing, free-range slaves that are just as greedy and self-interested as they are. Why would the master want to kill his slaves, especially when they are absolutely no threat to him? Can a master ever have too many slaves? Maybe. But why set out to kill them when the slaves are doing a perfectly good job at killing themselves? So the problem of an overstocked workforce really takes care of itself. If there are too many rats in the rat race, then the rats will claw, scratch, and eat each other until things become a little more manageable. This happens naturally, so there is no need for the master to destroy his slaves. If he really wanted this, he could just simply legalize suicide and offer government-assisted euthanasia. But it goes against the principles of slavery to destroy slaves or to allow slaves the option of an assisted death. After all, you are a resource, and this is what constitutes the already existing resource-based economy. The slave is the greatest resource there is. The money and the material goods are the perks and fringe benefits of slavery, and at the same time, the way in which to control the slaves. Who needs whips and chains when you have money and material goods? This keeps the slaves willing, docile, divided, and in competition with one another. The best way to maintain a slave is to trick him into thinking that he is actually free and has a say in matters. Therefore, the slave gets to choose which labor he will perform and vote on which slave master will oversee him. It all works out just perfectly, to the point to where today slaves believe there is no such thing as slavery, and therefore no slave masters. There's a line from the movie The Usual Suspects. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to make the world believe he didn't exist. And this is a great trick, but it's not his best trick. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to get the world to associate true freedom with slavery, and slavery as freedom. As friend as enemy, and as enemy as friend. As good with evil, and evil with good. And it's working. People don't think they are naturally, inherently free. They think freedom is provided to them through government, constitution, rights, and military force. People think being reliant on a system to feed, clothe, shelter, and drug them is helping them survive, not teaching them how not to be self-reliant, and therefore utterly lost if the system were to disappear. People think Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are some representational organization of a good and loving God. not the evil mass cults of a tyrannical, controlling, power-hungry, egomaniacal devil that only cares about being worshipped and obeyed. It just goes to show you that a wolf in sheep's clothing is a very effective scam. People think the Illuminati is an evil secret society out to dominate and destroy. This was never the Illuminati of history. The Illuminati was a group of scientists, philosophers, spiritualists, artists, and free thinkers who banded together to collaborate and exchange ideas. They had no choice but to remain secret, otherwise they would be accused of heresy and end up murdered by the evil religious dogmatic church. And you think that these are the bad guys? Only a true slave views people of liberation as the enemy. Perhaps it is you who is part of an evil society, and it's no secret. Do you call a greedy, corrupt system of corrupt politics, corrupt government, corrupt religion, and corrupt corporations friend? Because people of true illumination and true enlightenment do not seek power, greed, corruption, or world domination. This is not Illuminati, but the powers that be right now, right out in the open for all to see. If there is any group out there right now that seeks these things and calls itself the Illuminati, then they have hijacked the name only. This is not the true Illuminati. The Illuminati, as an official group true to its name, disbanded long ago. The true Illuminati still exists today, but it is not organized in any way. We know who we are, and we can recognize each other, not by membership dues, secret handshakes, or annual meetings, but by each other's ideas, practices, and related experiences. Don't be afraid to own that name, the Illuminati. If you are a scientist, a philosopher, a spiritualist, an artist, or a free thinker, then by default you are automatically in the true Illuminati, people of illumination. And the Illuminati does seek a new world order. We are people of change, of innovation, of the cutting edge. The world order we seek is one of wisdom, compassion, and non-polarity. And this would be a new world order worth adopting. Because don't get it twisted. The usual New World Order association you have of some vision of dominating world government power, oppressed citizens, police states, monopolies, microchipped people, and death camps is not a New World Order. It would be the current world order unleashed. If you let the current world order get out of control and go berserk, it will become this nightmare world. And it won't be anything new. It will be business as usual. But of course, we won't allow this to happen, because the only way they can accomplish it is with fear. You must allow them to walk over you as you cower in fear for them to grow into a monster. But we are not afraid. This is a touchy subject, isn't it? A woman's right to choose. Right off, we should do away with the euphemisms. You are not pro-life or pro-choice. You're either pro-abortion or anti-abortion. Period. The term pro-choice is misleading. People act as though this was always some eternal inherent right, as if with the dawn of mankind, abortion doctors evolved and crawled out of the mud and were providing abortions. So apparently a woman's right to choose wasn't always a right or a choice. The Eastern philosophical take on abortion has got nothing to do with morality, but more to do with non-interference. Once an awareness has formed, it should be allowed to run its course and not be interfered with. An awareness congeals in its most primitive state the second the sperm and the egg establish fertilization. Now, this doesn't mean that a fetus should have the right to vote or have to pay taxes or to have to pay a fare for an airline ticket. These points, although understood, don't change the fact that life has formed and there is an awareness present. It's just that it's in a very early primitive state, and nothing that can be said changes that. And you can do whatever you want, just as long as you understand you are cutting short an awareness's journey that should be allowed to run its course uninterfered with. Of course, there are certain circumstances where abortion can be permissible, such as rape or incest. I mean, ideally, people really shouldn't be having children. Concentrate on yourself. You have enough to sort out all by yourself. Having children is really just passing the buck. You have an opportunity right now to work on your spiritual progress. So go ahead and work on it. The idea is to transcend the wheel of life and death, not to continually linger in this world of suffering and pleasure. We are trying to maneuver our spirit into a position of not having to be born again. So why would you contribute to anyone else being born? But with that being said, once a life begins to congeal, it shouldn't be interfered with and should be allowed to run its course. But nevertheless, abortion is here to stay, and it is an available option for women. And of course, if you outlaw abortion, then women will simply resort to back alley abortions, or abortions that will then become available on a black market. If there is going to be abortions anyway, then why not have them safe, sanitary, and practiced by experienced, trained professionals? Ultimately, it is a woman's right to choose. But I would suggest that there are many choices a woman can make before she even reaches the point of having to decide whether or not to have an abortion. The first thing a woman can do is to choose to be responsible. Women need to govern their bodies and minds and not let their bodies and minds govern them. A woman should be the master of her hormones, vagina, and emotions, and not the other way around. You are a complete whole person as you are, and you don't need a man to complete you. But if you are going to become involved with men, then there are three choices you have the right to exercise before an abortion even becomes an issue. First, you have the right to choose not to have sex. Second, if you decide to have sex, then you have the right to choose to use protection. Third, if you decide to have unprotected sex, then you have the right to choose not to have unprotected sex during your ovulation. So as you can see, a woman has the right to make many choices that would preclude the choice of an abortion. The main one, of course, is to choose to be responsible, which means educate yourself about sex and be the master of your body and mind. This is another touchy subject, isn't it? There are a lot of different reasons that people contemplate or actually commit suicide. Pain, depression, loss, despair, poverty, biological and chemical imbalances, Disease, anxiety, self-hatred, rejection, relational breakups, the effect or withdrawal from drugs, failure, family problems, victimization, and a whole lot more. Suicide is not even an issue of being a right, because anyone can commit suicide at any time they choose. It's a choice that's been around since the dawn of mankind. But should one exercise this choice? Should governmental systems be providing people with the choice of painless euthanasia? Again, it comes back to non-interference. Awareness should be allowed to run its course without being interfered with. But this non-interference applies more to others and not so much to the self. In other words, you have the right to choose it for yourself, but you don't have the right to impose it on others. And so, how does spirituality address suicide? Of course, spirituality doesn't encourage suicide because it accomplishes nothing spiritually. Some have suggested that perhaps suicide is the most effective way of truly breaking attachments, overthrowing the ego, and disconnecting from illusion. But this is not the case because destroying your form does nothing to reconnect you to your pure fundamental essence. Only detachment, ego death, and disassociation with delusion in conjunction with intimacy of your pure spiritual essence will get the job done and prepare you for transcending form. If we do not properly uncondition our programming and commit suicide, the only place it will lead is right back into form. And it doesn't matter if someone is fed up, sick and tired, depressed and ready to die. All these negative associations do not constitute detachment, but rather even more attachments. They are but attachments to negative identifications. Not everyone that is suicidal can be helped. Some can. So the best we can do is get a feel for a person to see if there's anything that can be offered to assist them out of this negative condition. And basically there are three types of suicidal people. Those who are serious about it, those who are not serious about it, and those that only talk and fantasize about it. People who are genuinely serious about suicide commit suicide. They don't let anyone know, they don't care about any pain associated with it, and they get it right the first time. There's not much that can be done about it because by the time we find out about it, they are already dead. People who are not serious about it will talk about it, make half-hearted failed attempts at it, and display all types of signs and cues that indicate they are feeling suicidal. This is commonly referred to as, quote, the cry for help. These people can usually be helped and are usually open to be helped. So it's important to help them before they turn into one who is truly serious about suicide. People that only talk and fantasize about suicide are self-hating misanthropes. They hate life, hate themselves, hate everybody and everything, but are no threat of actually committing suicide. They are simply playing games to emphasize and punctuate their extreme hatred. Despite their hate, they still derive pleasure from mundane indulgences. This really reveals the transparency of their bullshit. It exposes the truth of their psychology. They are basically disgruntled addicts that hate life because it can't be satisfaction all the time. If you really care about the problems of the world and about alleviating suffering, then you don't add to it through hate mongering. But they really don't care about suffering or the problems of the world. This is just a front to try to contextualize their hatred into some kind of noble cause. The only thing these people really care about is getting attention any way they can, glorifying their ego and indulging their hedonistic desires. There is no way to help these people because they don't want help nor do they need any help. They are not suicidal anyway. We can only help those who are suicidal and seek help. And it's important when we offer to help, not to chastise. We should not invalidate someone's suicidal tendency, nor make them feel that they have no right to feel the way they do. This will only push them further away. The only exception to this are those who are terminally ill and suffering. Some type of institutionalized euthanasia should be available to these people if they choose to die rather than unnecessarily suffer for a few more weeks. And it should be reserved only for those who are in the throes of death. What is gained by prolonging their suffering a little more? One of the flaws of antinatalism is the assumption that the sentience that inevitably becomes incarnate through sexual intercourse is an unwilling participant. Another flaw is the assumption that the life that results from a newborn is by default negative and predominantly ruled by suffering. The third flaw is the assumption that the antinatalist objective has any chance of succeeding with the aspect of desire still in play. So let's go over these points, but right up front it should be recognized that desire is the linchpin that serves as the key junction to the entire ball of wax. If you won't recognize it and are further unwilling to give it up, then you might as well not even open your mouth, because all you're doing is pushing hypocritical contradiction. If it doesn't behoove you to remove desire, then from where is this antinatalist salaciousness derived? Because you are not propagating that people should give up desire. You are telling people to go ahead and live life in the conventional way. Get your kicks, have your thrills, indulge your passions, but just don't make any more babies. As if this has any chance in hell of succeeding or even being feasible. It's like telling a heroin addict not to address their addictive personality, but to just give up using heroin. It's not even realistic. If you condone desire and are pretty much telling people to go ahead and be desire whores, how is not having babies a possibility? You want people to exercise responsibility, but unfortunately, desire and responsibility don't work well together. These are not aspects that inherently go hand in hand. Desire almost always overrides responsibility. You see it all the time. People that squander money and valuable time chasing alcohol, drugs, gambling, and over-sexualization while neglecting their families and wasting their resources. So indulging desire is always a waste, since it does not encompass a need, but only a want. In other words, optional luxuries that can be done without. To say otherwise is like saying, be reckless, but be careful. Or be a greedy pig, but be giving. It's a nice ideal, but it never ends up working out that way. As long as desire is in play, then people are going to desire to have babies. And arguments about the imposition of suffering and forced involuntary participation won't sway many people, since these are arguments that amount to nothing but a big pile of relative subjective value judgment crap. For starters, a sentient being that results from sexual intercourse is an unwilling participant. Since when and says who? This really assumes knowledge about something you have no knowledge about. Sex is the most predominant pinnacle avenues of desire. When two desire machines engage in an act of desire, then the result is going to be the fruition of another desire machine. In other words, the resulting newborn baby is a game player. It was lured by desire, is fueled by desire, and comes into the world a perfectly willing participant of potential desire. If the seeds of potential life were so reluctant and unwilling to participate, then a lot less life would congeal despite a perfectly functioning reproductive system. There would be a whole lot more unsuccessful pregnancies, stillborns, miscarriages, or sudden infant death syndrome. But this isn't the case, is it? 7 billion people is testimony enough of this. So any life that is present in this existence is here because at least it started out desiring to be here. Once again, if you do not remove desire, then the continual cycle of life and death will continue. Desire fuels the entire system. Some babies will go on to develop into adults that recognize that this cycle is pointless and not worth sustaining. But if you are unwilling to address desire, it's a lost cause. Oh, but wait, life is not worth living without desire, right? You don't have any experience or frame of reference to make such an assertion, not to mention that this is completely untrue. A life free from desire is not only totally possible, but a way of life that is of a higher quality and one that actually facilitates true responsibility. Less desire, less sex, less sex, less babies. It's that simple. And it's a formula that could actually have a chance at succeeding if people would give up on being desire whores. And you have this choice. Don't give me any of these justifying excuses of no choice and non-responsibility due to things like nature, DNA, and primal instincts. This is all avoidance and refusal to take command. Bottom line, are you in charge of your body and mind, or are your body and mind in charge of you? You are not a slave, you have a choice. You are only a slave if you are resigned to the notion that it's a choice not worth making or impossible to make. So really, put up or shut up. Another area where you're not going to get many sales is this notion that life is negative and predominantly ruled by suffering. This is your own relative subjective value judgment, and that's all it is. Believe it or not, most people enjoy life. And if you went around and actually talked to people who actually suffer more than the average person, you'll find that most of them want to live, do not wish they were never born, would not jump at the chance of euthanasia, and would not condone nor endorse antinatalism. So realize that antinatalism represents a tiny minority that strains for legitimacy due to the fact that this minority is privileged and experiences very little suffering. This, compounded with the unwillingness to discard desire, translates into a movement that is not going anywhere. And after all of this, don't get me wrong, I am all for antinatalism. The continuous spinning wheel of life and death is not necessary or mandatory. We are not doing anything that special, profound, relevant to justify continuance. Life is indeed a pointless dream and an unsubstantial illusion that only amounts to glorified masturbation. There is a lot of wasted suffering and a lot of wallowing in restrictive limitation. But it's not going to stop, improve, transform, or get fixed without the removal of desire. If you are unwilling to address desire, then you might as well give it up. Antinatalism won't stand a chance. The wheel of life and death will keep on spinning until extinction. But removing desire is taking responsibility. And for the average human being, about the only thing that will foster the clarity and wisdom to make a conscious choice to not reproduce.